Okay. My name is Freda Little. I'm now living in Burlington, and I joined the Air Force in 1943. At the time, I was working as an operator at Bell Telephone, and I wasn't 18, so I really wasn't thinking about joining service, although my brother had joined in the Army, and my dad had been in World War I. So we had emigrated from England. So we were quite conscious of the unrest, and so my brother felt it was his duty to join. Well, and coming up to 18, I thought, well, maybe I should go too. So at Bell Telephone, I was working with a girl. Her name was Jane Ellis, and she used to come home to lunch with me sometimes. And that route took us by the Air Force recruiting station up where St. Joe's, or part of St. Joe's is now, St. Joe's Hospital. So we went in, put our names in, and lo and behold, we were accepted. So we were, well, during this time at Bell Telephone, my outstanding remembrance of that was when the Pearl Harbor, we were on the switchboard, and it just lit up like a Christmas tree, and we didn't know what was going on. And then we eventually found out. So anyway, we were sent to Ottawa, to Rockcliffe, for our basic training, which was quite an experience, where we met girls from Americans and Jamaicans and from all the provinces out west, and a couple of English girls that were over here had been sent over. And of course we had to get all our needles and our medicals, dental, and then our uniforms. So this was all quite a strange experience, because most of us had never been too far from Hamilton, as I was living at the time. So then we were learning how to, all the laws and rules and regulations. And we had our turn at cleaning the barracks, cleaning the washrooms, swabbing the floors. And then we were assessed for what trade we might want to be. So with the telephone experience, they thought I would make a radio telephone operator. So that, and made that I would be sent to Montreal, #1 wireless training school. And there again, we were across from the Mount Royal Church, or cathedral, I should say. And it had been a school for the blind, so there were no doors on all the washrooms. So that was an experience too, because most of us weren't used to living like that. We had our own rooms or bathrooms. We had to share all this. And in our training, we had to learn Morse code and semaphore and the signaling, the lights. We always call them the blinkers. And learn how to, parts of the radio, and do all that. And I forget how many girls there were in that particular class, but partway through, one boy was assigned to us because he had been ill, and we were at the stage of training where he had to leave when he was ill. So we had this one boy. His name was Sid Stein. He was from Hamilton, I believe. So we had quite a lot of fun with him, a lot of jokes. Then the day came that we passed our courses, and we were waiting postings. Of course, we all wanted to go overseas, never thinking that Newfoundland would be able to get into them, but it took us overnight to get to Gander because we had to stop. It was a local train. You had to stop at every little town to pick up milk or take cans off and supplies, and then we finally arrived in Gander. Well, we got settled in our barracks, and we'd look out in the mornings and we'd see these Newfoundlanders, the men, going down the tracks with a stick over their shoulder. Couldn't figure out what that was all about. And then at the end of the day, you'd see them coming home with a bunch of rabbits strung on the stick, and that was dinner. So that was, I mean, we would never been exposed to that either. So the station was quite vast and busy. And we finally figured out where we were going to have to work during the day. And now our job was tracking the fighter aircraft when they would go out on a scramble. They didn't have much in the way of equipment, so they had this. They send out a signal every so often, like a beeper signal. And around the perimeter of the airport there were these 3 silos. They looked like silos, but they had to disguise them so that the enemy wouldn't know what they were. But inside these silos were like a TV antenna, and with a dial that you 360 degree, and we would monitor the channels that the aircraft were calling in on. And if they got into, we were given a .303 rifle, which we never learned how to fire, but we had to carry them for protection. So, and then, of course, there was the mess hall where we had our meals every day. A lot of powdered eggs, which we weren't used to, and a lot got thrown out. And they ran a piggery, so we had lots of pork, but very few fresh vegetables. But and then for recreation, we had there was a drill hall. We had a gym where we could play badminton or go bowling. They had a ski club organized, and off duty we'd go out and groom the trails. And then they had skis for rental, or not rental. They were, if you were going skiing, you just went and got a pair of skis. This all entailed working with other, mostly airmen, because they would be chopping the trails or whatever we had to do. And there was a chapel and a bowling alley. And then, of course, the post office. We all had to haunt that for parcels and goodies from home. And then the lounge where you could take food and cook it if you felt that we could go into the town of Gander, which wasn't very big at that point, but the storekeepers were very friendly. And there was a theater there too, so we were able to watch movies if we wanted. And of course there was a big American base there too, so we were we were told not to fraternize too much with the Americans because they didn't know about girls being in the Air Force. And then there was, well, I guess we had them in the chapel. They were called discussion groups. And at that time, Joey Smallwood was coming into prominence for Newfoundland to join the Confederation. He was a very interesting person. And then we got to organize volleyball teams, and basketball teams, and baseball teams. And we would be flown to St. John's or Moncton to play their teams. I mean, this was something we never dreamed of doing, flying everywhere, because that was sort of a new way of traveling. The TCA, I think, was coming on the scene at that time. So I undertook to join the basketball team. And of course, there were men coaches. And we'd fly to St. John's and Moncton. I think we flew to Halifax once. But we became the Eastern champions. And I fell in love with my coach and eventually married him. But that didn't last too long and eventually we were divorced. But I don't know, it was so different to me, you'd find people from other countries and you would talk to them about their way of life and learn a lot of things. But also, the men found that we were capable of doing jobs other than nursing, teaching, or clerks, stenographers. So, and then, what were we getting? Oh, I remember once, it was the 4th of June, and it snowed so heavy the runways had to be closed. Well, we never thought of snow being in June. But anyway, the runways were closed. That was another thing we found out about, the different climate. But to go into the town and talk to the Newfoundlanders, well, there were Newfoundland girls in the Air Force too. But they were very friendly people, funny. And then, of course, at dances, most of the girls were expected to go, so the boys would have somebody to dance with. And so time came, it was, Victory in Europe Day. So things started to wind down. But during this, the Americans got involved in the war. So there were wave after wave of bombers. They'd land at Gander to refuel and then take off. This every 2 minutes. But one night, he was taking off a full load of fuel. But unfortunately, something went wrong, and he landed not far from our barracks. Fortunately, it didn't catch fire, but it was quite a scare. And so then came the day that we were no longer required. So we were sent to Dartmouth to await our posting to Rockcliffe for demobbing. And after the war, I was able to go back as a telephone operator. So I don't know really much more what to tell you.
That's an interesting story. Give us a little bit more about the actual RT job. Like you said that they were tracking signals, but there must have been a lot more to it than just tracking out an aircraft that was out. Give us a bit more of that so we have a broader knowledge of it.
Well, we had to learn how to tune in the radios and just monitor for signals that were coming in, because of the being on the Atlantic coast, they changed the codes every day, so we had to monitor for aircraft calling in for Gander Tower, say, and we'd have to tell to switch to another frequency. But as far, we just had the responsibility of, if we sent the wrong degree of calibration in, that would send them away from the base instead of coming back. So you had that responsibility. And then the plotters had to figure out their position they would have a board with our 3 positions on, and they would cross them to find the actual direction to direct them in on. And that was phoned into, I guess, the filter ops, and then they would be in touch with the aircraft.
How many planes would be up there at one time that you'd be responsible for?
I think 5 or 6 was the limit at that time.
Were you involved with, like, the transient incoming aircraft? Were you plotting courses for them, or were they on someone else's responsibility?
Someone else was responsible. As long as we were monitoring the frequency, we responded to any aircraft that came in on that frequency to direct them to the right one.
So these large flights of American planes coming through, they would call Gander and you would direct them to another frequency and then go back to
contact the tower, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I see.
What was the feeling there during the war? Was there a euphoria, or how did you feel being a young person doing a job like that?
Well, I guess we never realized the seriousness of it all. It was a job we were doing, and we had to do it properly, or somebody'd be stuck out in the middle of the sea. And but you know, it was just getting used to being with other people, because at home you were usually in a room of your own, and just your family mostly, or your friends at school or whatever. But these were people from different parts of the country or other countries, and the Newfoundlanders themselves they didn't quite live with all the luxuries that we had. And
did you ever visit the homes of the Newfoundlanders?
At that time, no, we didn't. Well, because of I don't know whether they felt that we would reveal something to them that we weren't supposed to. So we were sort of kept away from the civilian population.
You enlisted when you were roughly 18 years of age.
Yes, I did.
Because of puritanical Canada, if you will, girls were particularly sheltered. What was it like for you and your family to all of a sudden tear this 18-year-old young lady away and send her off to the services?
Well, they were quite shocked when I told them, but they said they wouldn't hinder us because it would be, well, an adventure, if you will, but it would be something to help the war effort was our main goal. So of course everybody was into that. And some girls weren't eligible for service, but a lot of them went into the munitions factories and airplane factories. And their work was just as important as ours in that sense.
But they were staying at home. You were being taken 2,000 miles away, basically. And what did this do to your mother, your father?
Yeah, and of course there was no long-distance phone calls allowed unless you could pay for it. Well, so the letter writing was quite frequent.
I'm sure.
And the parcels, that was a lot of...
And letters were usually censored, weren't they?
Yeah.
Was there ever a feeling, or did you ever run into being homesick or see other girls that were...
Oh, yes, we did.
How did you cope with it?
Well, we just told them that was very tense times, that this is what we were supposed to do, that the end of the war would come. We always held that hope. And they, well, unless they could get leave, which was, for a lot of them, if they came from the West, it was kind of hard for them to get home in 2 weeks with leave to the West Coast and back. But you would just do your best to comfort them and get them involved in something else that would take their mind off it.
You were saying that you traveled to Halifax and St. John's to play sports. What type of aircraft would they have been using? Do you recall?
Well, I think the Cancel aircraft was what we traveled on. Yeah.
What was?
Oh, and the DC-3s. Yeah. Yeah. They only had the bucket seats in them. They weren't any fancy seats in them then. They were bucket seats. But we didn't mind.
You got a chance to fly.
Yeah.
And that was a new experience for you.
That was a new experience. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the fact that you felt an amorous attraction to your coach. You were with a squadron of other women doing similar jobs that you were doing. Was there other women that found male attractions in the woods and marriage or what have you?
Yes.
So it was a common factor.
Mm-hmm. Well, with I don't know how many thousand men and 200 women did. You figure it out.
You had the pickings there, didn't you? There was 200 women on that station at the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I can't remember. I don't think there were any American women. Not at that time. Maybe later. But not at that time.
And you were totally segregated in your bunks and your activities.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, I mean, we had dances, and some of them got up a theater group. Now I had one fella in that theater group. He went on to take training with Lorne Green, and he became he was on TV with Buffalo Bob, and he was the clown anyway. But he was very funny. And he's worked for CBC for years. I still think he has an affiliation with them, but I haven't been in touch with him lately.
You had mentioned that time about Joey Smallwood coming into prominence. Did you hear him speak?
Oh yes, he was at our discussion groups, and he would tell us of his plans and of joining with Canada. He thought it would, his main goal was to improve things on the island of Newfoundland. So he eventually did get his wish.
You mentioned that you ran into or associated with ladies from not just Canada, but from other countries as well.
Well, some girls were from Jamaica. That was under British rule at the time, so they were accepted into the service. And some American girls joined up in the Canadian service.
These ladies from Jamaica, were they RCAF or just RAF?
RCAF.
They were
Yeah.
Canadian, they were all in the Canadian Air Force.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
What was it like to leave the service at the end of the war and go back to civilian life? You had a certain amount of freedom when you're in the forces. What was it like going back home?
Well, I was just married, so, and my husband, with the remuneration they gave you afterwards, he was able to go to university, which he would never have been able to do in peacetime. So he got his university degree, and I worked at Bell Telephone, and well, we went back to Hamilton to my parents to start out with, and then I got transferred to Toronto because he was going to U of T. So we got our own place in Toronto at that time.
Was it difficult for you coming back into civilian life? Because you were
Well, not really. I mean, you come back into the girls that didn't join up were still there, and they would, of course, wanted to know what you were doing. But I went back to the Bell, so I knew all a lot of the girls there. And this was all before we got dial telephones. So that.
I've heard from other ladies that once they got married, particularly at Bell, they were told to leave. They would only have unmarried women working there. Did you have a problem with that, or never?
No,
never
I never had a problem with that. No. No.
Did you? This is a bit off the topic, but when you came back, you were away for 2 years. What did this do to your seniority at Bell?
Well, you had to work. You had to work 5 years, I think, to regain your seniority. But, well, that didn't happen because I started a family. But I was 24 then. So after I had started, I had 3 girls by that husband, and then he decided he didn't want to continue the marriage, so I was left on my own. And I did get remarried, and I ended up having 9 children all told. So that kept me busy. I didn't need to work. I had work cut out for me.
You had all the work you could handle with 9 children.
Yeah.
Excellent.
But I don't regret it one bit.
No, I'm sure you don't. That was a very... and then you moved from Toronto eventually back out to Burlington.
No, I went to... Well, after my husband left me, I just put my finger on the map and said, I'm going to move there. I'm not going to move home. I'm going to be on my own. Well, my mother had had a stroke, and she had passed away, so my dad didn't want me to be his housekeeper, so I just put my finger on the map, and Peterborough was where I landed. So I went to Peterborough and found myself an apartment. And then I met my other husband, but he was from a town called Warsaw, which is 17 miles east of Peterborough. I mean, he wasn't able to join the service because he had his leg broken in a logging accident. Then that was a whole different experience too, because we were on a farm, and I'd never been raised a farm life, so. But that's not related to the war. That's post-war. So.
Small town city girl went to Newfoundland and then went to a farm.
Yeah.
It's quite a life.
Yeah.
It is.
And then I was there till 6 years ago when he was killed, and so the 3 of my girls were settled around the area. So they decided that I should move back here, because at that time I needed a hip replacement, and they didn't want to be driving back and forth on the 401 to look after me. So I landed in Burlington.
Good. Skipping back just a little bit, when you were in Gander, you did mention that there was dances and whatnot. How often did they have a dance on the base? Was it a regular thing every week?
Yeah, yeah.
Did they have their own?
They had their own station band.
Had a band?
Yeah.
So they didn't bring in any of the big traveling bands like
No.
the...
No, it was all local, or Air Force talent. And like I say, the theater group was all our own talent.
And of course there was chaplains on, and if you didn't want that service, you could probably go into town and go to the local church if that was more of your liking.
Well, they had a Protestant and a Catholic service. But unfortunately, some of the boys were Jewish, but I think there was 14 nationalities in my first husband's barrack room. So there.
You're bound to get a diversity of religious beliefs when you get 14 different nationalities.
And then, of course, it was always a joke because they had the piggery going there, which is our fresh meat supply. And that wasn't in their religion, so I don't know what they had those days.
Bacon and eggs, not even bacon, just eggs and toast probably.
Well, it was powdered eggs, and not a lot of us were, and powdered milk.
That took a bit of getting used to, didn't
That
it?
took a bit of getting used to, yeah.
The flavor just wasn't the same.
No.
But you managed to survive it.
Oh,
How long were you actually on the Rock? What year?
I went there in March of '44. I was there till, I guess, June of '45. Yeah, because I got leave to get married in July, and then I went back to Rockcliffe for the final.
So you had
discharge.
16 months out on the island.
Mm-hmm.
It was quite an experience, wasn't it?
Yes, it certainly was. And well, you had to organize your own fun. Like we were near Gander Lake, so we could go down there and swim and have picnics and whatever. You had to make your own fun. I mean, there was no television.
No.
And
The winters were quite long there too, weren't they?
yes. Yeah.
So that meant you went to the movies, you went to indoor facilities more than anything because it was too cold for anything outdoors other than skiing.
Well, it was skiing, yeah. And well, you could go into Grand Falls. That was down the line a bit, but I guess we must have got the train to go down there, the local train. And of course, you have dances there and more shopping facilities. And of course, well, sometimes you would catch the TCA plane to St. John and go down to St. John for something more. But that was quite difficult walking around there because it's built on a hill. And you'd ask for directions, and they were into rods. You'd go so many rods this way. We didn't know what that was. Not like blocks, or you go so many rods this way. And then we'd always head for a fruit market or someplace like that where we could get some oranges or fresh fruit or fresh vegetables. I know once when we went with the basketball team, we went to the market and we got a cauliflower, and we were all walking down the street eating cauliflower, fresh cauliflower. That was
A far cry from powdered eggs.
yeah. And you could go to a restaurant and get real eggs.
Yes.
And bacon.
Did you eat a lot of fish when you were down there?
I can't remember that we did, really. I don't know, I just remember, we were fed. We always complained, but we survived. So I guess that's how you learn.
Well, thank you for coming in today.
Yes, marvelous.
Well, it's been my pleasure
It's been
to,
very enjoyable.
I hope
Marvelous.
that contribute something to people's
Certainly
knowledge.
will.
And
Certainly will. Excellent. Take this thing off for you.
the fact that women can be useful.